preview of the G6 game of the year between the Boise State Broncos and the UNLV Rebels. College football is in full swing, so we're back on the Big Mountain with a very special guest to talk about the most important G6 game of the year, the Boise State Broncos traveling to the UNLV Rebels. I have Aiden Petterson with me. He is a writer for Boise State with the MWCConnection. So welcome, Aiden, to the Big Mountain.
Thank you, JY. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on. I know we got such a huge game coming up this Friday night. You know, the battle in Vegas in the desert. Looking forward to it. See a whole bunch of previews already coming out from CBS Sports, Yahoo Sports. Everyone recognizes a huge game in regards to Mount West and the college football playoff.
Yeah, I love it. I love all the attention it's getting, rightfully so. This is going to be a massive game. So let's talk about the game. Aiden, I'm going to let you obviously talk about the Broncos. That's the team that you cover very closely. I'll be talking about the Rebels. Let's start with the Broncos offense. Of course, I think at this point, everybody knows Ashton Jeanty. If they don't, they're living under a rock somewhere. He is my Heisman favorite. He's been our Heisman favorite on the Big Mountain since pre-season. But I want to hear about the whole offense, because I'll tell you, I was big on Maddox Madsen preseason as well. I thought he was the rightful quarterback to be named quarterback, and he was. But I'm going to let you talk about the Boise State Bronco offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it starts and ends with Ashton Jeanty, the Heisman frontrunner in many minds. And there's nothing really to say other than just he's fantastic. But I want to spend a ton of time like you're talking about. Obviously, Maddox Madsen is someone that is a lot of them look at him like a game changer or a game manager rather. And while that's true, he's being efficient. He's being asked to do what he needs to do, right? Dirk Cutter, the offensive coordinator, is not putting a ton on his plate. He's doing what is asked. He's not turning the ball over. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in keeping the ball in their possession. And beyond that, Cam Camper at wide receiver has been a huge addition from the transfer portal by way of Indiana from a year ago. And he came off an injury. Not a lot of people knew what to expect of him coming into the season, but he's been amazing. He has solidified himself as wide receiver number one for Madsen. Matt Lauder at tight end, while, again, a little underutilized like other tight ends in the past at Boise State, he has definitely come on in the last few games. And he's one of those where you don't realize how big of an impact he truly has until you're in the third quarter. You realize he has 4 catches for 60 yards, and he just helps extend the chains. Wide receiver Latrell Caples, again, just a security blanket, right? We have a lot of security blankets on this team. Maybe not anyone that goes for a whole bunch of 80-yard bombs, really. We hoped Austin Bolt would be that. Maybe Prince Strawn. Unfortunately, those haven't really panned out the way we hoped. But we just have guys that can dink and dunk, move the chains, and allow Ashton Jeanty to do what he needs to do when he goes for 200 yards, 3 TDs. Get out of Ashton Jeanty's way and keep the ball in your hands is really what Dirk Cutter is trying to do with the Broncos offense.
Yeah, that's a great point about Maddox. I mean, just an efficient guy. I believe he only has 2 interceptions on the season thus far. Hopefully I didn't just jinx him. But that's, he's doing what he's asked to do. And, you have a home run hitter in Jeanty. You don't need 3 home run hitters on a team or you end up striking out a lot. So, be efficient, manage the game, don't turn the ball over, and use that home run hitter when you need to. I think that's a perfect point. So I'm going to talk about the defense. I mean, there's talk now. UNLV is talked about UNLD with the way this defense has played this year. And, I got to give all praise to just a few players, but the defense as a whole has been truly amazing. I was very high on them coming into the season. I told Steve, who I'm missing tonight here on this show, but I told him how good this defense is going to be. And I don't know if he quite believed me, but he's now using the term UNLD. Jackson Woodard just all over the place. I mean, this linebacker is amazing. He's got 63 total tackles, 3 sacks, 4 interceptions, a fumble recovery. He's all over the place. I mean, the defense runs through him, and he's a fantastic talent. Another kid that I was really high on, the transfer from Texas, Jalen Catalon, kind of the shutdown corner, but their whole secondary is very, very strong. But if you had to pick one guy, I'm picking Catalon. He has 55 total tackles, a sack, 4 interceptions on the season and a forced fumble. Overall, this team has 22 sacks, 13 interceptions, and 3 fumble recoveries. So they are able to turn the ball over on teams. And what I have seen a lot over the first half of this season is really the second half adjustments that they make to this defense. The first half of games, and I look back to just last week versus Oregon State, I go back to the Kansas game where they were kind of just bending a little bit. They weren't pushing the envelope too much, but man, they come out in the second half and just impose their will on offenses. You really saw that in the Kansas game. I mean, they were going off in their running game, and by the second half, Kansas looked like a shell of themselves. They couldn't do anything right. Daniels he's running for his life, throwing just silly passes because he has nowhere to go with it. So I got to give a shout out to this coaching staff and to these players for the adjustments that they make in the second or during halftime for the second half. Broncos, this has to be a 4-quarter game because this UNLV team, especially on defense, really turns it up in the second half. So I'm anxious to see how they play against a very high-powered offense, as you said, and an efficient offense in Boise State. So let me talk a little bit about the offense from UNLV. Then I want to hear, obviously, what your take is on the defensive side for Boise. Obviously, everybody knows the story of Sluka leaving the program. Hajj-Malik Williams comes in. Clearly a better quarterback in what they're asking of their quarterback to do. He's a complete dual threat. He throws the ball very, very well. 70% completions here as he's become the starter. 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So actually numbers kind of, you talked about Maddox Madsen's numbers, kind of similar. Now he's got less games than what Madsen has, but very similar in terms of just efficient. But man, he can also run. When you combine Thomas, Jones, and Williams, Thomas and Jones being their number 1 and 2 back, they really kind of share carries. I don't know if they have a true number 1 because both Thomas and Jones can really just knock off home runs whenever they really want to. But they have over 1,000 yards between those 3 guys, kind of a 3-headed monster. They have 10 rushing touchdowns between those 3 guys. And then receiving, they're no slouch either. Ricky White, I think, is the best receiver in the conference. I think he shows it. I had him as one of the top 2 or 3 coming in. I think he is the best right now. Fantastic talent. He has 46 receptions, 416 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He makes catches that NFL players make, and he makes it look easy. So a guy that obviously the Boise State Broncos have to be very much aware of. And then DeJesus, who does everything. I mean, he's a receiver, he's a kick returner. We'll get to some special teams here. I want to talk about them, but he has 17 for 293, 2 touchdowns receiving, but they also get him on sweeps. They get him to run the ball because he's so elusive and he has such crazy speed. They want to get the ball in his hands, and he's a really special talent as well. So this offense is no joke. So how do you think the Boise State defense handles an offense that can do both passing and rushing?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. You talk about Ricky White and you talk about DeJesus. I mean, it's a scary sight for Bronco defenses because in games past, we are not great against explosive offenses, frankly. It was kind of surprising we actually held Washington State, for example, a few weeks ago. We held John Mateer in check, I think, better than a lot of us thought, really.
Yeah.
And I give credit to defensive coordinator Eric Chenander for that. The way he's been able to select the blitz packages he wants to send. He's been a lot more methodical about it lately, and he's picking the times to do so a lot better. You know, Georgia Southern, going back to all the way to the first game of the season, it was a little hit or miss, right? Sometimes it works. Sometimes they get a slant and it goes for 40 yards. Oregon, we saw the same thing. Granted, higher caliber players, obviously, than most other opponents Boise's going to see this year. But really, we don't have an offensive, or not an offensive, but a defensive pass rush that's really been great and reliable. Ahmed Hassanin has been solid. He's had moments. He's starting to come on midway through the season. Hopefully, he continues to get better as it goes forward. Jaden Virgin Morgan, really slow start to the season. The last 2 games or so, he's finally picking up the pace. Sheldon Newtons has a few highlight plays as of late. I mean, Portland State game, he basically pancaked the guy on the defensive side of the ball. But defensive line, they need to find a way to collapse the pocket a little bit on Hajj-Malik Williams. If he has all day to throw, he's mobile enough. That's what they're able to do against Mateer in the Washington State game. Linebackers, Marco Notriani, he's starting to get there. It took a little bit of time, revving the engine. Andrew Simpson is really a big catalyst. we have been trying to use him more as a pass rushing effect or impact player rather, and that's really helped. In coverage, he's not great. He's just, he's a great player. Sometimes you have specialties. Rushing the quarterback and getting in the backfield is exactly what he is meant to be, really. And then the bugaboo for Boise State, the secondary, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Surprisingly, not enough teams, I think, if I'm being, playing devil's advocate, really, they have not tried to expose the secondary as much as I thought they would. They've tried to make it balanced, but really, I haven't seen this secondary get immensely better to where it needs to be respected like teams are currently doing.
Mm.
And UNLV has the right formula and the right ingredients in order to, I think, expose that. Ricky White's one-on-one along the perimeter, along the hashes, he's going to win that battle more times than not, really.
Yeah.
And then you got David DeJesus. You got other guys that physically they match up with Boise State, and Boise gets burned over the top. That's still the main thing that happens. And Chenander, if he's sending blitzes, there's going to be a risk that's going to happen more often than not. And if you get in the shootout, I don't love Boise's chances because they rely on Genty so much to break the game open.
Yeah.
Passing the game, we haven't seen Madison forced to win a game yet. And that, if I'm Barry Odom, I would think that's what you're going to try to do is limit Genty the best you can, of course.
Right.
But force Madison to win the game. And if UNLV does that, BSU's giving me a world of hurt. And the defense has got to find a way to at least make the Rebels extend drives. Big 3-4 play drives that go for 80 yards. That's not going to be it for BSU. I mean, Genty's a superhero, but he's not invincible, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, when you look at their biggest tests so far this year, the Washington State game and the Oregon game, and they were up to the challenge both times. And I agree with you. I certainly didn't think the spread of victory for Boise State against Washington State was going to be as great as it was because Mateer is a very, very good quarterback. I mean, you've seen what he's done over the course of this year. The only loss that team has is to Boise, and it was a pretty substantial loss to the Broncos. And there, with the Oregon game, I mean, Boise's right there to potentially win that game. So, when they're tested, they clearly show that they can bring their level of play up. You look at some of the other games. Do they have to beat Hawaii by 40, 50 points? No, they don't have to. Do they have to beat Portland State? But they don't have to. Certainly they could do it if they wanted to. But when they have been tested, I have seen a Boise team that is truly in the top 20 in the nation. They have a lot of talent on that team. We all like to talk about the offense because that's fun, but you bring up some really good points there with the defense as well with Boise. So let's talk a little bit about. Okay, go ahead.
One thing I had really, really quick, and you touched on in the offensive portion, turnovers.
Yes.
BSU has been real poor at creating turnovers. And like you said, I believe it's 2 interceptions all season, and UNLV's third in the nation in turnover margin. I think at plus 13 is what I saw.
Yeah.
That, I think, so probably make or break the game. And I don't want to touch on it too much, but again, Madison's got to protect the ball, turnover margin, and you're going to probably allude to it, special teams, right?
Yep.
We'll talk about it a little bit, but turnover battles, you win or lose games that way.
Absolutely. That was another thing, as we get in kind of some of the intangibles, if you want to call that special teams as intangibles, I had that written down as well. The turnover margin dramatic here. It's either 12 or 13 for UNLV. Either way, it's a big difference. I believe Boise right now is 1. So that's something that Boise's got to be very concerned about. Maybe not so much trying to turn UNLV over, but making sure they're not turning the ball over. And Maddox, has done really well not throwing the picks. So Boise has to keep this turnover difference down to even or 1, or it could be a tough night for them here because UNLV knows how to turn the ball over on defense. That's a great point. The other thing I wanted to bring up here was special teams, and I'll hear what you have to say here, but DeJesus it can be a game changer in special teams in terms of both punt returns and kick returns. Their average is 22 yards on kick returns and 15 on punt returns for UNLV. So they're not huge numbers, but I'll tell you what, it only takes one time for him to break one, and he has the skill to do it. The kid is super fast. And even just his dukes and jeeks and whatever you call them, I'm just amazing. I don't know how he gets around guys, and all of a sudden he's around the big guy, and away he goes. So the special teams battle here, I think, is going to be really important. Especially, again, we talked a little bit about that Oregon game, and they gave over several special teams touchdowns to Oregon, which really was the difference in the game. You don't do, at least one of those, they win the game. So special teams here is a massive intangible for me. I've been high on the kicking game for Boise State, both with Dalmas and Ferguson Reynolds. And they have a great kicking game, but if they can't cover those kicks, you got a bit of a problem. So where are you at with special teams? How you feeling here with that side of it?
I don't love it, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. And the main reason you hit on James Ferguson Reynolds, he has been out the last few weeks with injury. He has not played. Terrence Shiv has taken over at punter, and he's done a fine job. Some of the timing has been a little askew since he took over. And Ricky White on punt coverage, he's been coming off the edge and blocking
Yes.
a few in recent games.
Yes.
And if that timing issue stays that way, I got a bad feeling that one of those goes the opposite way, and that breaks the game wide open, right? You talk about turnovers.
Yep.
Jonah Dalmas, he's going to be Jonah Dalmas. I think he's roughly 10 or 11 kicks away from the all-time NCAA record. He's all reliable. You need him. You put him out there, he's going to do his job more often than not. But I really do think it's the punting game. That's a big thing with Shiv. Return game, we haven't done much, really. Nothing substantial. A lot of fair catches. And a lot of fans are they're a little hesitant to put confidence in Stacey Collins, or special teams coordinator. He came back from Penn State this
Yep.
past offseason, was really good in his first stint, blocking numerous punts in his tenure here the first time around. This year, it's not as good for whatever reason. I don't know if it's personnel issues or I really couldn't tell you. But for whatever reason, less explosive plays. I don't think any blocks, maybe one or two, but no consistent pressure is the way I'll put it. But I really do think if you're going to go special teams, obviously trying to stop David DeJesus, that's a massive thing. Because even when it's good punt coverage, he finds a way. The
Yep.
jukes, the deeks, everything you
Yep.
alluded to. He's got that, what Devin Hester with the Bears a long time ago.
Yep.
You have someone that has that MO just to do exactly what they need to do and almost be a painter, if you will, on a
Yep.
canvas. And they just do exactly what they need to do. So limiting DeJesus, shooting those punts high, timing with Terrence Shiv. If James Ferguson Reynolds does not play, I really would keep an eye on that. But special teams, UNLV, I think, has a huge advantage, frankly. If BSU can somewhat come out even with that and not be in the red, I call that a win.
Yep. Agree. Yeah, and great point about Ricky White. I mean, I'll tell you what, every time there's a punt, I've been watching, I try to watch as many Mountain West games as I can. It's impossible to watch them all, but I watch as many as I can. But I'll tell you what, some of the best parts of the UNLV games is watch their, when the other team's punting to see if Ricky White or somebody else is going to get to it, because it's like they're just unblocked every time, and the speed that they have there is incredible. So yeah, great point there. Real quick, let's talk coaching and anything else you want to hit on, and then I want to see if you have a prediction for us here at the end of our discussion. So, coaching, obviously, Danielson in his first full year here with Boise State, I think he's done great things. I know in the offseason, I think there was a little bit of hesitation with some fans. Is he the right guy? Is he not the right guy? He's been phenomenal, in my opinion. I mean, he looks like he's kind of a coach's player. He's got them just going, well-oiled machine all the way. Good mojo, all that kind of stuff is great. And then Barry Odom for UNLV. I mean, what a turnaround this guy has done in a very short amount of time. This is a juggernaut that he made very, very quickly. And I like Brennan Marion there as the OC. And just the whole coaching staff there at UNLV has done phenomenal things with this team. So I kind of give it a little bit of an even. Obviously we have Cutter there. He's come back into Boise, really good OC. So I think Danielson relies on his coordinators. Odom is a great head coach, but he's also relying on his coordinators. So I'm not sure if I'm going to necessarily pick one of these teams to have the better coaching staff. I think they both have phenomenal coaching staffs.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think you gotta give it, if you had to choose one, right? I'd probably go Barry Odom just simply because of experience. He's
Yeah.
endured the SEC, like minds, some of the greatest play callers. He's seen it and had to scheme against it. And I think him being a defensively minded coach against an Ashton Genty, I think he'll probably put up the toughest test schematically that the Broncos have seen against him. Danielson's passed nearly every realistic test. If you want to exclude Oregon, and even there, like you said, they were 3 points away, special teams, from actually winning one of the biggest games BSU's played in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Um, but he hasn't, I don't think, come under pressure in a game where they can realistically win or lose, where there's not expectations leaning so much one way or the other,
Yeah.
and him come through yet. Every game other than Oregon has largely, they've been in the lead for most of the game. Even Georgia Southern, which was kind of a weird, it wasn't fluky, but it just was a whole bunch of points, like an arcade game, really.
Right.
All the other games, they've been ahead, and they just kind of have put the stiff arm on them and held them and held them and held them. I want to see a game where it's the fourth quarter where it's tied and all the momentum is on the away crowd there in Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, and see how they respond then. Because that's the one thing I haven't really seen is do or die, can you make the right call? And during the Andy Avalos tenure, which I know we want to leave that in the past as PSU fans, but that was the thing that really hurt us a ton.
Yeah.
You know, the middle 8 between the second and third quarter, decisions that put you on the wrong side of the ball there, and then it just would bleed more and more later into the game. Having Dirk Cutter obviously is a huge plus, really.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, he's seasoned. He's seen everything under the sun. He's not gonna get rattled, even though fans may want him to do X, Y, Z. He knows what he's doing, right? We're not. None of us play D1 football for 99% of the population.
Yeah.
And Eric Chinander's getting better, right? He's had a lot of stops. He's finding his way. He's finding his way. And then Stacey Collins, I really do want to harp on that for special teams. I think more than Cutter, more than Chinander, I think he might be the second most important coach in this game if that leans heavily towards the Rebels.
Yeah. Great point. Well, I appreciate you giving us all the thoughts that you have here on Boise State. I am so excited for this game. Every time we do previews of games, I wish we could just segue right into the live game, because now I'm all stoked. I'm ready to watch the game. But hey, we're going to wrap this up. Before we do, I want to see if any prediction on this game. How do you think this thing is going to end up?
I got a weird feeling. I see some fans, and heck, I was talking to you about pickleball earlier. I was talking to a guy who watches a little bit of football. He's a Mizzou guy. And he was like, why, you know, I think Boise should win by 2 scores. And I'm telling him, you haven't watched UNLV then. You really haven't. I think people are they're leaving the Rebels under the radar. They're not ranked, because a lot of people just look at the AP and say, oh, they're not ranked. All right, it is what it is. But that crowd, they're expanding ticket options at Allegiant. It's got to be one of their biggest crowds probably have had in a long time. And it looks like the fan base is invested, for the most part, I should say.
Yeah.
So I think Boise State's going to pull out the win, but it's going to go into the wee hours in the morning, and the blood pressure is going to be high. I got a score of 35-32. Broncos narrowly covering the spread, depending on what odds you get according to Vegas.
Right.
I think they're going to pull it out narrowly, but I think it's going to be a heck of a game regardless, and it's going to really shine a really nice spotlight on the Mountain West, and hopefully the leader in the clubhouse for the college football playoff spots for the group of 5.
Absolutely. Well said. And I promise I wrote this down before you gave your prediction. It's very similar to yours. I have it 34-30 going towards Boise. I think it will be very close. Anxious for this game. And you're exactly right with Allegiant Stadium selling more tickets, getting up into the second tier, 200 level, or whatever it is up there. That's phenomenal. It's just such a great showcase for the Mountain West, for these two teams. And 100% you're correct. The winner of this game propels them into that CFP spot, assuming some crazy something doesn't happen in the last couple of weeks of the season. And we could have potentially a rematch in the Mountain West Championship game, which I don't know if I could handle that. But hey, we're going to do this game first, and I am super excited for it. So Aiden, thank you so much for coming on the Big Mountain.
Thank you, JY. I appreciate it. Hopefully for a great game. And all Mountain West fans rejoice, right? You know, everyone's talking about this game. Yahoo Sports, CBS Sports, Josh Pate, of all people. He's going to the game Friday nights. So let's hope for a good one. And regardless, the conference is in a good spot for 2024.
For sure. Absolutely. Well said. Thanks so much. Make sure you give this episode a like and subscribe if you like our content. We do everything Mountain West, everything Big Ten. We do live pick shows every Wednesday evening at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. With that, we'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.